What could be more at odds than the complexity of human life and the simplicity of a digital signal? Humanity with its linguistic and cultural diversity, the digital with its uniform binary flow. Yet, humanity has found the allure of the digital to be irresistible, digitizing everything from communication to commerce, from love to war. And what happens to humanity when their fuzzy world gets digitally encoded? That's the question at the core of the Digital Humanities. The digital half refers to artifacts that use ones and zeros instead of atoms for their fundamental building blocks. Tellingly, the humanities half is harder to define. Per a common definition, the humanities investigate expressions of the human mind. But that's impossibly vague. So instead, let's see how the humanities actually contribute to our understanding of the world. Have you ever had an argument with someone, even though you were both right? Then you already know that there are different types of understanding. Okay, let's say we asked, what is light? A biologist and a physicist would each give distinct but valid answers. Now, think how an architect or a photographer would answer. Light would be something else entirely. The humanities then offer such a different type of understanding, as humanists often use critical and speculative approaches to inform their perspectives. Okay, an example. A fashion marketer would research how tall their brand's stilettos should be, while humanists would wonder why women wear high heels in the first place. The humanities can also be seen as a different level of understanding. If we asked, what is a door? The full material and mechanical description would only get us so far. It would fail to explain the sense of safety it creates, and say even less about what people think, feel, and do behind those closed doors with their sense of safety. So, the humanities ask larger questions and lead to a higher level of understanding. So another example. A computer scientist may work out how an algorithm can most efficiently be run. A humanist would critically reflect on the data that's feeding into that algorithm. They might then find that it's far from value neutral. For example, that an algorithmic lending decision is discriminating based on race. Humanists often take on simple subjects but reveal their hidden depths and richness once examined critically across contexts. In the digital humanities, we work towards understanding what is gained when societies move online and what is lost when much of our lives are bytes on a wire.
So, what kind of discipline do we get when we marry the digital with the humanities? Turns out, like many other things, academia cannot agree to a definitive answer. However, there are two distinct approaches which both claim the mantle of the digital humanities. The first approach focuses on the digital as an instrument. It is also sometimes called computational humanities. The idea is to bring the tools and power of computing to bear on the traditional work of the humanities. These scholars employ computational techniques to help them with their research, building digital tools and developing techniques to collect, organize, analyze, and interpret large corpuses in a systematic way which wouldn't otherwise be possible. For example, text encoding and indexing are essential to build up an archive. So computational models and text mining algorithms allow scholars to sort and classify far larger bodies of work. The Tisha project is an example of this type of digital scholarship in practice. The project produced a digital archive and text explorer for the Zapotec languages of Mexico. The text explorer presents the historic linguistic context so that modern readers can read 16th century texts. The project also developed map and timeline-based access paths, so users could engage with the materials in ways that were meaningful to them. The second approach is the exact opposite. Instead of bringing computation to humanities research, it takes the humanities toolkit to investigate the realm of the digital. In our view, deploying computational techniques is but one of the possibilities of digital scholarship. Digital technologies are not just tools or applications. They are manners of doing, which are deeply nested in human practice. They are sites of struggle and change, reflecting the many forces at play. They inform the way we understand the world, which in turn shapes the way we interact with it. Technologies have always been cultural, just as culture has always been technological. If we acknowledge all of this, then the question of how our lives were transformed by the digital needs to be answered from different angles and levels. First, we need to understand what affordances these digital technologies, tools, and platforms offer. What do they enable and limit? Then we need to observe how people create meaning from practice. What are the intentions, inconsistencies, and unintended consequences? And what is the impact on society? What dominant values and perceived views are mirrored in the digital world? And how are alternatives being mobilized to reconfigure values and meaning? Knowledge that is taken for granted is the least likely to be questioned. That is because the power structures which support this knowledge are the most influential in shaping our everyday lives. To challenge the process and the production of that knowledge by thinking through the basis of our positions and be willing to scrutinize and critique them is the foundation of critical thinking. This, to us, is the most fruitful and timely way of approaching the digital humanities. We call on humanists to decipher and interpret meaning so that people's minds and actions can be rebased with clarity of mind and goodness of intention. As ultimately, the humanities are an attitude towards life. It zeroes in on how we might cultivate rational and empathetic individuals to be part of a thriving society as responsible citizens. In other words, the vision of the humanities is to build a more ethical, equitable, and just society. What tools do we need? How should we govern? And what can we do to move closer to our goal? As the digital future of humanity is writ large, we bring these questions to bear on the digital domain. Throughout our series, we'll be taking the critical approach to the digital humanities.
So the ambitions are grand and lofty. But to understand why the digital humanities are vital, let's look at some of the upsides. Our society faces a great challenge that will take lots of reflection and imagination to solve. How can we avoid replicating systemic social issues in the new world we're creating online? The digital humanities take on this challenge by acting as an independent monitor and guard. So, when systemic social ills take root online, digital humanists make those structures explicit. They problematize the injustice and then seek ways to overcome the obstacles to social justice and equality. This approach also allows us to prod and perhaps even poke through our filter bubbles, rekindling a shared reality that's essential for social cohesion. The social world is a fuzzy world, so much of the information it produces is inconsistent, imperfect, and subjective. This is an irreducible part of being human. That's why the humanist tradition teaches us to comb through this messiness with empathy while remaining logical. These methods are going to be essential in preventing the spread of fake news, solving the loneliness epidemic, and cultivating positive digital habits. The forces that shape history don't simply desist once they reach the present. So, to understand where we're speeding off to in our hyper-connected future, we also need to understand our digital heritage. That's why humanists trace the origins and trends of all culturally significant developments that happen online. They explore the disruptions in culture, politics, the economy, and really anything that's shaping the zeitgeist. Thanks to the digital humanities, we've noticed the Instagram aesthetic morph from aspirational to relatable. We can relive the history of hashtag activism on a Twitter timeline. And we remember that the web's vision of a decentralized utopia still led to a handful of platforms dominating today. Based on this historic and critical understanding, humanists make for great guides to shepherd humanity into the virtual unknown. Of course, decision makers should always consult many types of understanding, but humanists are well suited to offer practical guidance on ethical decisions that confront society as a whole. Take the nascent example of virtual worlds. This is the decade in which they will blossom. But how should virtual worlds be governed? Who can claim the value that's produced in those worlds? And what limits should be imposed on those worlds, if any? The Digital Humanities offer moral and intellectual guidance to answer these questions, as well as others that deal with the personal and social dilemmas on our digital horizons.
We have some exciting videos lined up for you. Are you ready? Let's begin by making our mark on the social credit system. Your reputation precedes you. Join us in the cabaret that is QAnon, where we dive into the ultimate conspiracy mashup. Netizens, rise up! Meet the forefathers of crypto. The cypherpunks are early advocates of internet privacy. Orient yourselves on the political compass. Are you a Gandhi or a Mussolini? Finally, find the light in the dark web. How people build trust in the most unlikely of environments. Welcome to the Digital Humanities.